Garrett Cook.
Hello?
What is your middle name?
It's Arthur.
Garrett Arthur Cook. How did you begin your writing career?
Well, I've been writing poetry since I was around like 5 years old. I wrote poems for, it was one of the first things I ever did. Like, first thing, I'm sure that pretty much like the first thing I ever wrote was a list of every monster movie that I liked when I was 3 years old. I just got out a bunch of reams of paper and I drew Godzilla for ages, and I wrote a list of every monster movie that I liked. That was the first time I started scrawling something. I drew a bunch of really terrible comic books because I was 3, but yeah.
Featuring monsters?
Yeah, generally. They were generally just, all about Godzilla. I would just draw reams of Godzilla comics.
Would you say that Godzilla movies inspired your writing?
What the fuck are you doing?
I would say that Godzilla movies inspired my everything. That's, it was the first narrative I really liked.
What do you think drew you to Godzilla? What do you think drew you to that, as opposed to Guiding Light or?
Well, I think when you're a small child, and something as blatantly antisocial as a giant radioactive dinosaur stomping on cities and trying to beat the crap out of the personification of peace and light in butterfly form is going to be appealing to you. Little kids are pre-social. They like to smash shit. They like to throw shit around. So Godzilla is that thing in every little kid. Just kind of out there. It's just like the monstrous, raging id that knocks over the blocks and doesn't want to go to bed at 7 o'clock.
That's a great way to put it. I actually, when I was a kid, you hear stories a lot of a young Bill Gates or some such that was taking apart their computers as a child to learn how they worked and then putting them back together. I was the kid with the Atari smashing it on the ground and stomping on it because I didn't understand it, and I had no tools in my life to allow me to understand things. I didn't have people in my life that enjoyed knowledge or enjoyed teaching, and I think that a lot of where the appeal for fantasy literature and gaming and shows, fantasy, and I think the trend of zombie apocalypse movies, fiction, television shows, comic books, I think it also comes from that same, it comes from the place that you're talking about, but as we grow, that antisocial behavior and the antisocial mentality, it sticks with people who see society as a bad thing, or society sees them as a bad thing, and they aren't accepted or included by their authority figures. Say they have bad run-ins with cops, or teachers are constantly punishing them, or their parents are drunks or neglectful. I think that people tend toward, they want a zombie apocalypse to wipe the slate clean. And it's their ability to, I'm the hero because I'm tough and rugged, and I've survived so much emotionally in my own life. Now it's my turn to be the hero because you don't like me, I don't like your world, maybe I don't understand your world, and you don't understand my world. But I think also a lot of fantasy literature is moved by the same thing. People that tend towards
fantasy literature has a correlation of knowledge equals power, which really appeals to like the nerd sect. It really appeals to people who were bullied for reading books.
Right, definitely.
Like, you bully somebody, like, oh yeah, well, what if this book I was reading was, a book about fireballs? Then you'd be fucked, now wouldn't you?
Exactly.
Exactly.
So these early Godzilla comic books that eventually, you said, became poetry. And at what age did you?
At around 5, I started reading. I started becoming obsessed with. I became obsessed with Mother Goose rhymes, and I became obsessed with just every bit of poetry that I encountered. I just read. I was left to my own devices a lot, and my mother's mantra was look it up. So I looked it up. I read I sat with like the S volume of the World Book Encyclopedia, just like glued to it on the kitchen, on the living room floor.
I enjoyed the S volume because the S volume had the snakes section and also had the word sex, which was always fun for me to look up.
Exactly. The S volume is wonderful in that way. I also liked C because it had the entry for Carpathian Mountains. And I was obsessed with Dracula very early on. The first time I saw Dracula, like 6 years old, Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, then Horror of Dracula. Dracula and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde were just like the coolest shit ever for me. I tried to actually make a Mr. Hyde potion.
Yeah, that's cool.
I almost ended up awesome. I basically it was Dawn seafood salad, a combination of things from under the sink. I was about to drink the thing and die, and my mother stepped in and was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I assumed at the time she was simply frightened of the potential of my evil side, and this was why she stopped. Instead of the fact that I was just about to poison myself.
So 5 years old, Garrett Cook is reading poetry. He's digging into the sex section of the S Encyclopedia. At 5 years old, I was shitting in my own hand. I don't know if I could even talk or tie my shoes at 5 years old. So
not much has changed. You're still shitting in your own hand, Karen.
And not much has changed 30 years later. So let's move a little further down the line. When did you?
To be fair, it's the best way to have shit readily available.
This is very true. So let's fast forward a bit.
Certainly.
In Garrett Cook's world, when did you first begin to write short stories with an eye towards publication? At what age?
Well, I had I was kind of lucky in that I had an English teacher sophomore year of high school who was one of those Hemingway realists, a guy who won the Pushcart Prize one time, and then but he wrote cool stuff. He taught me a lot about movies and books and stuff, and he said this is the time when you should start submitting. It doesn't matter if you start accruing rejections. This is when you start your novel. This is when you start submitting. So I started my first novel, Save Circles, at 16. I sent out my first story query at 16. It was to McSweeney's. I never received I never received a reply back. Fuck you, Dave Eggers. You owe me postage, Dave Eggers.
Jeez.
But still, it was good to have somebody who knew something about publishing in my life that early.
Definitely.
I was writing the sort of stuff that that your literary mentor when you're 16 years old wants you to write, and he told me you could write what you write, but you've got a hard road ahead of you if you do. This stuff, you're gonna lead a really difficult life if you write what you write. And I told him I'm gonna lead a really difficult life then.
Yeah, that's brutal honesty, but that's honesty you need to hear.
That's my choice. So I knew from 16 that I was gonna be getting my ass kicked left and right. And it's an important thing to teach young writers to learn to get their ass kicked.
And I talk about it on this show all the time. It's that's a lost art in the. I'm a very, very big advocate of the self-publishing world, of Amazon Kindle and the other digital platforms to bypass everyone and just handle your own career yourself. but it takes a special kind of person to do that. And
It really does.
Our last show we had Adam Millard on, and he had a very interesting take on it, where he said that today's author needs to be a hybrid. You need to be submitting to legacy publishers and dealing with agents and small press and as high up the ladder as you can go in the legacy publishing, while also taking projects that aren't as commercial and going the self-published route with them. And I thought that was it's always one versus the other. Do this or do that. If you do this, you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't look at something as complicated as publishing in a binary.
Right.
As a binary, there are very few propositions in life that are actually binary propositions.
And because of that,
publishing is definitely not one of them.
Right, and because of that mentality, the us versus them or black versus white mentality, when it comes to the self-publishing or digital publishing versus legacy publishing, is people have this perception that if they get rejected, or maybe that they shouldn't even attempt to submit traditionally because of the threat of, the possibility of being turned down or being rejected.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very difficult thing, and that is a psychological block that in the small press you do need to overcome. And I must be honest, I myself have trouble seeing all these duotrope submission calls and deciding I want to take the next step. It's always difficult to take the next step.
It's made even more difficult knowing that publishing on Kindle is 12 hours away. And
absolutely.
It's created.
But the main thing is it does take a certain mentality. That the thing that self-published authors do need to realize, though, that mentality cannot be better reign in hell than serve in heaven. That can't be your mentality.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. And the issue that we're having,
there's a big sort of Luciferian streak in self-publishing in that way, and the self-published authors who make it are generally past that. They're not above that. They don't feel they're above accepting help from anyone. They don't feel people are squares or gatekeepers or fascists.
Right, and they're able to take criticism, and they're not publishing everything that they write.
And they're able to take criticism. They're able to grow and to improve and to adapt. There are a lot of self-pubbed authors who are not doing that.
And they're just publishing everything they've ever written, and that's creating. It's
publishing everything they've ever written. They're not hiring editors. They're not hiring artists, because I don't know. It seems like maybe these are people who were told when they were children that they were that they were the most brilliant member of the pack, that they were told that they were great, and they were reinforced they were great the whole time, and nothing they could do could be wrong. Maybe this was the case. Maybe that's how they've had that much positive reinforcement, or maybe they are actually the smartest person in their podunk East Fistington, Kentucky hometown. Maybe they are the smartest person at their high school, and more power to you being the smartest person in podunk East Fistington, Kentucky.
With 63 members of the graduating class.
With 63 members of the graduating class. But on the other hand, you're not the smartest person in London. You're not the smartest person in Berlin. Hell, you're not the smartest person in Lexington,
Definitely. I think it's also there's also another side with it.
Big fish in small ponds. Smart people are considered really rare animals nowadays, and we're all considered special. We're considered special, super powerful unicorns.
Definitely.
Instead of understanding some human beings are going to be born intelligent. This might be a freak of nature. This might be an odd thing for carnivorous apes to be able to read books, but, some carnivorous apes can read and write books. We should treat them like carnivorous apes that can read and write books. We should not treat them like fucking superheroes.
Yeah, and it's everybody. It doesn't matter if you're the smartest person in your podunk high school or not. People today the upcoming generation, they decide that they're the best, smartest, wittiest, prettiest, regardless of merit. And I think a lot of the issues that we have in the publishing world right now, not only it's not necessarily someone thinking I am brilliant and no matter what an editor says, this is the best work anyone's ever done. I think on the other side of the coin, there's just a fear and self-doubt that manifests itself like, well, maybe this isn't good enough, but I don't have to be good enough.
And it can happen the first time, like, you leave East Fistington, Kentucky, and you meet an actual smart person.
Yeah.
They become an object of absolute horror.
Yes.
You know, I lift weights all the you know someone's like, I can bench press 350, and then suddenly they walk outside and they see like the mighty Thor walking down the street.
So let's continue.
Aw, fuck. What do I do now? Where's my place? You at a certain time, you gotta understand that, like, when we see people doing great shit around us, our first instinct is going to be jealousy. Our first instinct is going to be fear. Other instincts might include sabotage or, anything like that. But for you to start getting successful, when you see somebody who's better than you, your first instinct should be, I want that.
It should be to learn from it, ask questions to it, attempt to be mentored by it.
To want to get to that place, even if you fall short, even if you're left like bleeding and broken and almost dead trying to get to that place, it doesn't matter because you actually tried, and you didn't try to and you didn't walk away in fear, or you didn't try to sabotage, or you didn't assume somebody because they possessed merit or intellectual ability was some kind of aberration, or is some kind of fascist, or is cooperating with the wrong side.
Definitely. Let's take this a little bit further down the field. So you started submitting. You submitted a novel and short stories in.
Short stories. My first novel I started at 16 and I finished it at 23. I spent 7 years perfecting that book. It was like Michael Douglas's manuscript in Wonder Boys.
So you made it. So you made it to 23. How many short stories did you have published between 16 and 23 as you were working on your novel?
I had none.
Zero.
I was zero. My book was ostensibly finished, and I kept on submitting it. My book was rejected by 63 agents.
63 agents. And how many short stories?
63 literary agents. My short stories, I don't write short stories all that often, to be honest, because they feel like a brain tumor. I don't know why. Like, it's always just like I get these. A short story is almost always like a summation of some kind of weird existential insight or dream or sick experience that I've had. I was writing a lot of flash fiction, but a full-fledged short story I don't write very often.
I had a period where when I very first started writing fiction, I moved from I'm a kind of an unusual case where I wrote screenplays and directed. Well,
that teaches you about plot.
Oh, definitely, yeah. No, I learned my plot through making films, but then I didn't write. I had never written a single piece of fiction until I had made 7 feature films.
Wow.
And I decided to turn to fiction as a way to escape the stress and anxiety I was feeling as a filmmaker. Being a low-budget filmmaker.
That's something I have a ton of respect for. I've seen even people trying to create student films. Somebody trying to create a 20-minute short.
It's basically actual hell.
Goes through so much more shit than than any of us go through trying to get like a novella out there, or trying to pretty much anything we can do is not as difficult as making a film.
It's apples and oranges. It's a different kind of stress.
It is an entirely different kind of stress. It's a different level of stress, and it's like the stress that a surgeon has instead of the stress that you have doing other things.
the stress a writer has is it's just trying to get your voice heard. It's feeling like you're in a black hole or a pit, and it's trying to express your individualism and not having anyone. The stress and the fear and the anxiety that comes from writing is speaking in a language that no one understands, or if they do understand it, they aren't listening. The filmmaking is completely different. It's a completely different monster.
The difference being there's definitely a difference between like having a lot of like immediate real world pragmatic stressors around you and having very valid, basically being experiencing very valid, very vivid nightmares on a regular basis.
Right, basically
something that's very much like being a writer. The reality of doing it is definitely it's fraught with paranoia and insecurity and just profound existential horror. It's a wonderful job, but it's the best job in my opinion. Doctors and lawyers want to do this. Definitely. I was amazed when the first time I read submissions for Bradley Sands' Bust Down the Door and Eat All the Chickens. I was looking at the people I was rejecting, and it's like, this person is a professor of creative writing at the college I almost applied to. This person is a surgeon. This person is a lawyer. This person is a journal.
I'm going to get off course for a second. I want to make a point about short stories, but before I get back to that, since you brought it up, tell me what your experience has been like with creative writing professors, because almost 201, every single teacher that I've had an interaction with as a publisher from the publishing side has been negative. They have the biggest egos of anyone I've ever dealt with as far as in the literary world, and it almost never turns out well. And it's never like you said, it's this is the creative writing professor for the college I almost applied to. Like, they already have, like, they're already esteemed, and then they come to a publisher, and it's not that their fiction is bad, it just maybe doesn't fit the theme. But I've almost always have a terrible negative reaction. Do you know who I am? Do you understand what I do? And I feel bad rejecting that.
Entitlement, like the level of entitlement is always like a problem. Is always a problem. I equate it almost, like if you asked somebody out, and they reacted the way that people react when you reject their fiction. Whoa, sorry about that. I have no clue what happened. This is... Okay, hold on, I gotta go back.
Yep.
To the thing?
Yep.
Okay, hold on.
Nope.
The fuck?
Yep, nope. This is the longest we've ever gone, by the way, without technical issues. So, hey, I want to give it up to Sean Ferrari for staying on the line the whole time.
Job.
I might be like freezing up every now and then. You just don't realize it.
Where's Katie, by the way? She's at
work tonight.
Oh, so we're not gonna have her stomping around through the shot, eating and smoking and whatnot.
You might.
Am I here again?
Be up pretty soon.
Yeah, you're covering the. There you go. There you are.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
We were talking about rejecting. You were saying you reacted. Go ahead.
Reacted the way people react when you reject their story. If someone were to react that way to being rejected for asking them out or being rejected for sex, you would think that person was a rapist. You would like that person, like, it would just be like, dude, not cool, right. Like, step off, like.
Right. And it makes
I got the drink. Thank you for the drink. I'm leaving.
Thank you for the goddamn drink. Now leave me alone.
I am leaving.
I agree, and the thing that really gets me with teachers too.
That level of entitlement. When you see that entitlement, it's not cool. Any way that it's manifested.
It's not cool, but at the same time, I always feel bad for teachers because they have done so much work, and they are in a position of authority, and they are an authority on literature. But
and they have so many things, like so many things stacked against them. They really do. It's a difficult job, and the teaching of creative writing. Like, there's some really good authors who are doing that right now.
Absolutely, and that's the thing is, like,
Stephen Graham Jones teaches creative writing. Eckhart Gerdes, D. Harlan Wilson, like, these guys are serious. These guys have that as their day job. There are certain kinds of creative writing professor that are different from that. You encounter the creative writing professor who's different from that on a relatively frequent basis.
Because they got one story published, they got the PhD, they got one story in the New Yorker, and they were never heard from again. And these people actually are are virulent in their pessimism, in fact. And they might be very good. They might have a really solid proficiency in academia, but they're not necessarily great fiction writers. And they equate one to the other. They think that.
Yeah, exactly. And the two are completely different skills. Teaching something and doing something are completely different skills. I mean, obviously, being able to do something really well helps you teach it.
Yeah.
But I would not, for example, want to learn how to play. Would you want to learn how to play guitar from Mark Knopfler? I don't think so. Mark Knopfler is not going to be a dude who, is not necessarily a dude who is a brilliant guitar teacher. There are people who play guitar less well than Mark Knopfler or Chet Atkins or Slash, who could teach you how to play guitar to a great degree.
Definitely. Let's go back to short stories for a second here. The point that I was going to make was because I find it fascinating that you said that you think of short stories as tumors in your brain. When I first sat down, when I left filmmaking and came to fiction, I did a lot of research. I bought a lot of the how to write books and whatnot. And even though we were in an extreme transition phase between traditional publishing and digital self-publishing, I still was trying to absorb all of it at once. And everyone agrees that when you start writing fiction, you need to start with short stories. You need to start submitting short stories and try to build your name on a small scale. And what I was doing was I was having a lot of difficulty with short stories because I came from the only writing I had ever done was a 3-act structure. I wrote a few scenes.
It's not a 3-act structure by any means.
And it was so what I was doing was I was sitting down and I would have these ideas. All right, well, I'm going to make this a short story, and it would end up being 60 or 70 or 80 pages long because I was trying to create something short, but I was trying to give it 3 acts. I was trying to give it a clear setup, a clear middle, and a clear climax and ending segment, and it was just driving me crazy. That's your dog?
I don't know. My roommate has a dog upstairs.
No. So. It was Sean's dog. It was Harley.
That's like a Boston Terrier.
My train of thought. Oh, so it's actually only been recently that I've realized. It took me. I ended up writing full-length works, and that was fine. It was no issue writing 100, 150, 180 page full-length because I could set it in the 3-act structure, and it was no big deal. It wasn't for a long time until I realized that writing short fiction is one scene. You've got one shot at it.
Yeah, exactly. That's why at the beginning of Night Gallery, every episode of Night Gallery, Rod Serling walks in and he shows you a painting, and then from the painting everything unfolds. It's one still. And that still is one moment. Everything radiates from that one moment.
Right.
You could see that really well in stories by guys like Raymond Carver. Like a Carver story, radiates from a single moment, from a punchline, and from a question.
Right.
You get that in T.C. Boyle. You get that in Stephen King. He does a lot of that. So yeah,
H.P. Lovecraft also. I grew up on H.P. Lovecraft. I grew up on H.P. Lovecraft and Clive Barker's short stories. That was my main introduction to horror fiction, and I loved how quickly they would get in and out of their work. But for whatever reason, I didn't go back to that structure when I started writing short stories. So it was difficult for me for a long time. It's taken me a few years to really nail the short fiction. But you didn't like short fiction. You worked on a novel for years. And where did this book finally land?
This book finally landed. This book finally landed nowhere. I had basically. I decided, like, you know, maybe the time has come for me to write a second novel. And I was in
63 rejections, and you said, let's set this aside and let's try again.
Oh, let's put this in the drawer, maybe. Maybe this is. It's the most depressing fucking thing ever written. It's depressing. It's violently experimental. There's a chapter that's a stream of consciousness from 10 different perspectives. There's a chapter that's just like that's just a shopping list and bits of classified ad. It's just like it's kind of like a Cronenberg Finnegan's Wake take on Dante. I was told it was a very good book and it was an interesting book, but that no one should ever read it. It's a book
that's great.
Ever read, but I basically ended up starting a second book after doing a bunch of true crime research. And starting.
Let's not leave the first book yet. I wanted to ask you a few more questions about the first book.
Oh, certainly.
Out of the 63 rejections that you've got, did you get a lot of notes on the manuscript? Did you make a lot of changes to the manuscript over time, or did you just
I got a lot of we do not need your materials at this time.
But nothing really constructive that you
this book had oddly enough sort of had the blessing of my creative writing professor. My creative writing professor is like, this is a very good book that I don't think you will be able to sell anywhere.
Did you make changes to it over time? Did you try to make it
more? Yeah. That's why I lasted. That's why I lasted 7 years. I finished it at 17. First draft was at 17. I think maybe 45th draft was at 23. It was 100. It was a 130,000 word dealie. It wasn't like huge, but it just kind of ate my life.
Interesting.
And then I moved on. There are images from it that I like a lot. There are chapters from it that I like a lot, but it's a portrait of and coming from a perspective of a much sadder person, of a person that had rationalized ending their life. And this is all, and it almost is like it almost is like you can feel the suicide dripping out of it. You feel you can feel like that this is an over-medicated 17-year-old synesthete writing this.
Do you think that great fiction has those emotions dripping from it? Do you think that's a requirement of great fiction to imprint an emotion onto the work, whether it be happiness, sadness, like you said, suicidal thoughts?
So I think you want to be able to imprint things. I think fiction starts with good fiction starts with empathy. Good fiction starts with intimacy.
That's what you're trying to communicate, right? No matter what you're writing, you're trying to communicate that emotion.
Yeah, you're trying to communicate an emotion, and you're trying to get into your reader's head. You're trying to have them experience with you.
We're trying to lie them into feeling the way we feel.
Yes, you're trying to get them to feel the way you feel with a series of very persuasive, heartfelt lies. Yes.
We're getting deep, Garrett Cook. Let's talk about your second book.
Well, the second book. So my then girlfriend Lisa and I had had run away from college because of annual $2,000 tuition hikes, a major misunderstanding with the student-run select board, which was tragically run by students. Worst part of the student-run select board, I would say. And we ended up with my family in central Pennsylvania. And that was and that town in central Pennsylvania, there's just kind of like these, there was like these Sasquatch tracks, these railroad tracks that on the fucking other end of them was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
And
now, did you come?
15 minutes, you found the TCM house.
Had you come from Boston? Was that where you were going to college?
I was going to college in Vermont, little liberal arts place called Marlboro. And I had grown up on the North Shore of Boston, Deep One Country. My hometown is actually, it's funny, if you actually do the math geographically, it would be possible to argue that my hometown was Innsmouth. But it was not actually Innsmouth proper, but it was equidistant from Newburyport, and it was a place where one purchased groceries in Ipswich being the town my mother was born in. At the beginning of Shadow over Innsmouth, Lovecraft mentions that like the Innsmouth residents would go to Ipswich for supplies, or and were close to Newburyport. So I was actually just from this. I was from this place with like there was the sea, and there was this weird distant howling, and there was like 400 years of history. The town I grew up in was founded in 1692 and was the site of America's first murder.
I love it. Were you familiar with Lovecraft as you were growing up? Did you know that he had
I found a copy of The Tomb and Other Stories, like the old Ace paperback. Just like it was just. It was in a very Lovecraftian position as well. It was just sitting on a radiator in my very haunted basement collecting dust, just kind of waiting for me. It was just covered with layers upon layers of dust, and I picked it up and I shook it off, and I was reading, and I read like The Tomb and The Festival and The Alchemist, I believe, was a story in that one. And then I started ILLing more Lovecraft stories. And found out that that I was like that I grew up in the thick of this man's fantasies. I'm actually I'm right now a few blocks away from Mount Auburn Cemetery.
That's awesome. I can't imagine.
Which is mentioned in a lot of Lovecraft's work. One of Richard Pickman's paintings, the one of the ghouls laughing, is called Holmes, Longfellow, and Emerson are buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery.
That's fantastic. I can't imagine being that close to the epicenter of Lovecraft's world. But let's move on to the second book. Now you're living in Pennsylvania.
I'm living in this like absolute redneck hell, and I'm getting belligerent. I'm wearing a T-shirt made with a Sharpie. Like some days I would just like I took a white T-shirt and I drew like a bloody knife on it. In black Sharpie and put like die rednecks die on it, and I would just like walk down the street in my white T-shirt with a bloody knife that says die rednecks die on it.
Wow. And
other times like I'd walk past the park and someone would spring a switchblade on me. Like my girlfriend, there was just like one time this guy like parked his Camaro and yelled "Get in!" And just like yelled "Get in!"
Jesus.
What the fuck, man? You fucking apes. I just kind of like I was just going nuts. I was watching these people and seeing this kind of subhumanity. And I was doing research on true crime.
Right.
I just like started thinking about like what if murder was legal? And I thought like, oh, that's kind of interesting dystopian novel. But I decided to do it from the perspective of a protagonist who is not having any fun in a world where murder is legal.
And this would become Murderland.
And is having like who is himself a murderer, but is murdering for what he thinks are good reasons, and just doesn't morally approve of like society going to hell. And that's where Murderland started. In Murderland, I wrote under the gaze of these like these subhuman monstrosities as I walk down the street about to be about to be knifed by members of the Texas Chainsaw family. That is what that town in Pennsylvania is like. That's like I do not recommend Central Pennsylvania unless you want to live in a place where you can get up every morning and be sure that there's a new child molester in the police blotter.
So this was an intense experience trying to get all this down.
Oh yeah, it was a very intense experience, and during it I was becoming a person I didn't like, but I understood that I had to become this person I didn't like, and eventually my then girlfriend and I got the hell out of Dodge, but neither of us had any kind of resources or any kind of support system, and we ended up with her folks in in Illinois, working and trying to get out of there. And
what part of Illinois?
We were in Warrenville.
Is that southern, central, or northern?
It's up here. It's in the northwest burbs.
Of Chicago?
Yeah, northwest burbs of Chicago. Yeah, it's it looks a real lot like that town from Halloween. It's kind of the spitting image of that town from Halloween. So if you wanted to know what it looks like walking down the street of Warrenville, Illinois, think of the first few scenes of Halloween.
Yeah, except
there aren't any Mexican people in Halloween.
I'm from Southern Illinois, but that's basically the same type of atmosphere.
Yep, so, yeah. Just did not care much for the Midwest, but a few years of grinding in, and I was about to turn 25 in a couple of months, and I got told by a publisher who had tried to submit Murderland to a year before that there was a new press coming up called Evil Nerd Empire, and I should send to Jeremy Needle from that press. And Jeremy Needle loved the book and wanted to make it his flagship title. And so Murderland Part 1H8 became the flagship title. He told me to divide it into 3 books, and we agreed.
Now, what was the length of time that it took to write the book? 2 years, or?
2 years, yeah. Took me a year and a half to write it, and then after that, a year and a half to sell it.
So what is your process like when you're writing a book? Are you writing 3 hours a day in the morning? Are you writing in fits and starts? Do you write in marathons? Are you writing at night?
It always depends on the book. I've done the 3-day novella thing with a couple of books. The first few times I did the 3-day novella thing, I created 3-day novellas in a month. I just set aside 3 weekends, and each time one of those weekends I created another one. One of them was Archelon Ranch, which was picked up by Lagoon Man. It's got a lot of good reviews and told people that I can write really weird shit.
Specifically for Murderland, what was your process like?
Oh, specifically for Murderland. Murderland was I would go to a park with I kind of became a bit in my habits like a serial killer. I would go to the public park there, and I would have my one subject notebook. Back then I was only writing in Mead one subject notebooks with black permanent marker, and I was writing in the Mead one subject notebook with black permanent marker, and my eyes would follow someone for a while, and I would write, and I would just sit, and I was just kind of seething and stalking, and then I would I would go home and type it up. Usually after watching a bunch of Argento films, or just some crappy Lionsgate thing. There was a big Lionsgate horror boom in the early 2000s, back when I thought you could sell any horror movie at a festival regardless of what the fuck it was.
Yeah, definitely. No, that was terrible. That was a terrible time.
Then they ended up just disproving that to every planet by doing it.
So, I wrote my first few books in a notebook also, and I ended up finding that all of my creativity, all of my emotional energy was being put into the notebooks. And And when it came time to type,
our object fixation is a big thing for writers. We're all very primitive in certain ways. We're all very like fetishistic creatures.
When it came time to type them up, however, I felt like I was. It felt like a copy. It felt like a carbon copy of what I had written. I didn't feel as connected whenever I was typed the second draft.
Absolutely, like I'm encountering that now with the. I just finished the first notebook of my horror novel for Deadite, and I've actually only been able to like type it up like 300 words at a time. Not just because of the brutality of the content and because of like the general disconnect that you feel from taking your words that are in this place that that it used to be about your hand and the intimacy with the pen and the notebook. It used to be just about your hand and working the hands and working the magic through the hands, and taking that and just suddenly feeding the words you already wrote into a repository for those words. It's a very different it's a very different thing. Yeah.
Well, I ended up I finally, it was bothering me so much, I was avoiding typing up works. I actually let.
Oh, I know how that is. I've still got my notebooks.
Yeah, I let my third book, Vampire Guts in Nuketown. I let that sit in a notebook for 2 years because I didn't feel like I could take what I had written, and I didn't want to. There was always so much anxiety between taking the notebook and trying to turn that into a digitized manuscript. Eventually, and when I finally did it, it ended up being I was so unsure if what I felt emotionally while I was writing it down, if it was going to translate. Maybe it was just all in my head. And when I finally did it, I was more happy with my second draft than I ever was with my first draft.
It absolutely is a cathartic experience when you get done with it. It's
when
very
you're finally done with it.
Very good. Finally get done with the thing. Yeah.
I didn't want my career to always be 2 years behind.
Our on Ranch took 3 days to write and 6 months to type.
It's weird, and I eventually stopped doing that. I eventually put the notebooks away and started typing into a laptop my first draft, and then going back over that over and over again. And I find that I have less anxiety when it comes to the rewrite because I don't have to take the notebook and go through all of that labor. Maybe it's just just I'm lazy.
It's a whole different experience. The notebooks are valuable because they give you fuck around time.
Well, that's what Neil Gaiman likes to say.
There's something very there's something oddly permanent about when you hit the save button. When you hit the save button, you're saving it.
And now you're responsible for it. And that's one of the things.
Now you have retrieved it, and you are keeping it, sacred to cherish and love forever, as opposed to what it's in a one subject notebook.
Right, and that's one of the things I learned.
To buy you fancy notebooks.
No, don't buy the fancy notebooks. Buy the 15-cent notebooks.
That's that changes the process altogether, because is this important enough for this?
And that's where you can find your best ideas, because you don't have that pressure. The pressure isn't there. You can just I'm just gonna fuck around in the notebook today.
About the 15-cent notebook. Yeah. So I really love these a girlfriend of mine in Korea was in the States in January and brought me this fabulous notebook that's it's a bunny. There's a bunny on the front, and he's carrying a bowling ball, and there's a squirrel standing next to him, and the squirrel's farting. And there's fart wind coming out of the squirrel, and the bunny is saying "fighting," which apparently is a thing they say in Korea. It's "cheer up, stay strong, pal."
Fighting. Interesting. Let me show you one of my notebooks.
Wonderful, wonderful bit of slang. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, fighting.
Let me show you one of mine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is the kind of shit I like to buy.
Oh yeah.
Right. I would just buy the stupidest like pink unicorns. Some of my notebooks are like fuzzy. They have fuzzy fronts.
Because of the amount of time I spent, like I spent in high school just fucking around, ignoring my chemistry teacher writing. I know nothing about science to this day. Like I don't know shit about science. I was so not there during chemistry class because of that time. I'm almost tempted sometimes to just go out and get a Trapper Keeper and fill it with loose leaf paper and just and see if I can find lectures of Carl Sagan or something, or somebody talking about science,
and just go in your trance and write.
And just fuck around. Just like,
listen,
no.
Dude, there's something to that because
I don't have to learn about chemistry.
Dude, my first few scripts that I wrote for movies, I wrote at work, and there's this weird psychological game that you can play with yourself, where if I'm here in my house and I've got this beautiful shrine built to writing, covered in monsters, and my plaque for the award I won this year for writing, I've got this just a beautiful area. I've got no children. I've only got a cat as a pet. I have no distractions at all. I've got like the perfect setup for writing, and I will find every excuse in the world not to do it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if you put me at a job where I'm responsible for something else, and I will spend all fucking day in a notebook writing and ignoring every other responsibility because fuck that.
This is the 4-year-old that tosses the toy aside and plays with the box. You want to play with the box?
Exactly.
It's just it's just how it is. You want to play with the cardboard box.
So how did it feel going from working on a novel for years, going from your adolescence into your adult life, working on this book, acquiring 63 rejections, eventually putting the notebook aside, writing another one, and having it end up the flagship book or series of books?
It was just so completely different, and I had some knowledge of the publishing world, but a lot of the knowledge I had of the publishing world was the knowledge of a publishing world that was starting to no longer exist, and a publishing world that was a bigger deal. That was it was the world of the writer's market. I was one of those guys with a highlighter and a copy of the writer's market, and I advocate nobody should ever purchase the writer's market. Nobody should ever buy a fucking copy of the writer's market. The writer's market is one of the worst ways to hypnotize yourself into kowtowing, into doing stupid bullshit, and into essentially just into telling yourself you can write things that you can't actually write. Because there's thousands of markets, and you want to get published, and you see there's $3 signs next to this one, a $3 sign market, that's a good market. You know what? Maybe I can write black lesbian erotica. Maybe black lesbian erotica is a thing that I can do.
I like that attitude. I really like that attitude.
That sounds awesome. But back then, I was thinking, I was thinking, yeah, maybe this book would be okay for this press that does things completely unlike my book.
Well, there's a difference between submitting your book that you wrote as a passion to a market and end up being rejected. But I really like your attitude there about the writer's market because essentially what you're saying is you can convince yourself to write in a certain style in an attempt to get published as opposed to writing truthfully from your own experience or your own emotions.
At the end of the day, what you got to ask yourself is, why do I want to be published?
What do you want to say? You have to be willing to write.
You got to ask yourself, why do I want to be published? If you don't have a good reason for that, then you're doing the wrong job. And if you want the wrong thing published, if you want to get published for saying the wrong thing, there's a lot of ways you can make money doing stupid, boring shit. There are so many ways you can make money doing stupid, boring shit.
Absolutely. Sean and I actually talk quite often about
that skill set.
Yeah, Sean and I talk quite often about the reality of the author that wants to be published to see his own face in publication, to see his own name on the cover of a book. And
Yeah.
it has no other reason, no other thing to say other than, now I'm published, look at this series of books that I have. It's coveting what other authors have without having that passion to be heard, without having anything to say.
Without having that passion to be heard, or even like, there's also just like kind of a simple, there's also just kind of a simple elemental lack of understanding to it. Of understanding why people do this, and just
Absolutely.
kind of like, at that point, you're just like, you're thinking on the same level of how as like the cat thinks when it sees another cat on the TV.
Right,
and it starts
absolutely. And I want that. I want the ball of yarn that cat has, as opposed to having any passion for yarn.
It's a cat like me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that. And it brings me back to, again, that period of my life where I was transitioning. I knew exactly what I wanted to say in film and what I wanted to do to be heard. What the style that I was writing was a very specific trauma-esque exploitation B-movie style, and I knew exactly what I wanted to say with that. I knew what I wanted. When people looked at the name Kevin Strange associated with B-movies, it had a certain, you knew what you were getting into. I had a very clear goal in mind as far as how I wanted people to receive that. When I switched to fiction, the very first thing I did was sit down with myself and ask myself, what do I want to say now? I have, because you have a blank piece of paper. You have.
That's a wonderful take, and I advise that to anybody who's transitioning in media.
Because you're staring at a blank piece of paper, and you can literally say anything you want. And coming from a background of film, I was always I was handicapped by the budget, the locations that I had, the abilities of my actors, my special effects that I could do, what kind of monsters or whatever.
You're essentially hampered in filmmaking by consensual reality, which is something that you are not hampered by in writing.
So you have to really
comes around.
You have to really know what you want to say. You have to have a clear idea going to work.
I can't say anything, which is why I always get. That's why I get so puzzled with some of the books, with some of the things that people write. Like, dude, there could be dragons in this scene. Is this as interesting as a dragon?
I love that.
If not as dragons to you, then why are you saying it? Is this the best? Is that all there is? Is this like the single? You could come up with anything, and this is the single most creative thing you could come up with.
Is this as cool as dragons? I like that. I'm actually going to use that from now on. Anytime I write a scene, I'm going to ask myself, is this as cool as dragons? Because if it's not as cool as dragons, you fucked this up, dude.
if it's not as important or interesting to you as like a dragon attack would be, yes,
I love it.
You should always try and carry that weight. You
so
should always do something that's most interesting to you.
So what did Murderland do for Garrett Cook, the author? Did it put you on the map? Did it get your name in the circles that you needed to be in?
It got me into like. It got me in. It dropped me into the Pacific Ocean, and it told me, and I had to fucking sink or swim. I had to figure out, like, I had heard of the Bizarro community, and I had gotten rejected by the Eraserhead questionnaire because I filled out the Eraserhead questionnaire not realizing that I am a person with I'm a person with some psychological problems. There was a thing like, what's the weirdest dream you ever had? Well, if you suffer from PTSD and you tell someone the weirdest dream you ever had, they might not feel inclined to work with you.
Now, let's go back a little bit, because this is the portion of the interview that a lot of people are going to be paying a lot of attention to. The Eraserhead newsletter. I've never heard of this. What was it? Where did it come from? And how did you discover it?
There was originally a questionnaire. Like, Eraserhead prefers to find people that they'd like to work with, to going project by project. And I think this is a good approach. It's an approach I take with Imperial Youth Review and the bloggers that I find, because you want to find authors who can constantly generate good content that you'll like, and you want to find people who will be good to work with. And
that aren't going to fucking melt down and lose their shit and disappear from the internet right after you invest time and money into their personality.
Exactly. And, you know, I was just like, you know, and when I filled out this questionnaire, back when there was the questionnaire, like,
Red flags. Red flags. This guy's crazy.
Red flag, red flag. And that was the state I was in. That was the shape I was in.
Now, where did you discover it? Where did you first learn of Eraserhead?
I discovered Eraserhead. Interesting. The protagonist of my novel was named Jeremy Jenkins, and I saw an issue of Cemetery Dance with an interview with Jeremy Robert Johnson. I wanted to see, like, this name is awfully similar to Jeremy Jenkins. I want to see if people know who this Jeremy Johnson is. And then I thought the issue of Cemetery Dance. This Jeremy Johnson is the most fucking awesome motherfucker ever born, is what I got that issue of Cemetery Dance. He is doing awesome shit. There's a community of people doing awesome, weird shit. Maybe I'm not this weird. My short fiction was, my novel was. I didn't know that at the time.
What year was this?
But this was 2007.
2007. Now, for people that don't know who Eraserhead is, give me a very short explanation of this publisher that we're talking about.
Eraserhead is essentially, they were the first press to use the Bizarro label. They were founded by Carlton Mellick on a dare using stolen copier paper. They started as a chapbook press, in which Carlton Mellick printed weird shit on stolen copier paper with his friends and had a socialist business model. It eventually evolved beyond being, being just a cool bunch of weird writers doing awesome chapbooks on stolen copier paper. It became, the first Bizarro press. It grew. And Eraserhead had a questionnaire for authors to get into it. I failed the questionnaire miserably in all kinds of ways. All kinds of ways. Like, for one thing, I said I didn't drink.
You didn't rent?
I didn't drink.
Oh, didn't drink. Okay. They didn't like that? They didn't like that you don't drink?
They tolerate when people don't drink, but if somebody just seems like they're going to be a total, if somebody seems like they're, they're twitchy and they're weird and they're not going to be any fun at the cocktail party, these might be somebody who you want to get on your roster.
That's got to be so difficult, and I'm sure that
there are the Edvard Munch, guys dropping a bunch of acid and doing the I Can See Forever like Sam Neill and Event Horizon, and but these guys are the exception rather than the rule in publishing.
No, I can definitely understand the necessity for a questionnaire because of the nature of Bizarro fiction is so subversive and so weird and so extreme. And I've encountered several of the personalities that have broken off from early on, 2005 or earlier, when Bizarro was first becoming a thing that people wanted to label and kind of file together and become sort of a community as opposed to just being a group of weird authors. There were absolutely crazy, unstable, sociopathic individuals that decided that there were some of the it was a rough there was a lot of gatekeeping had to be done back then, and there was a lot of alarmism and a lot of there were trust issues. It took a while to decide. It took a while for the community to really learn to trust again. Well,
because there were a lot of these psychos running around.
Being a naive, wide-eyed, basically idiot that decided he was going to become a publisher before he knew anything about publishing, I actually encountered several of those individuals that, luckily, I have a pretty good bullshit detector, and so between me and Sean, we were able to kind of identify these guys before we ever got into contracts with them, and made sure that we didn't do any business with them, only later to find out that they've been doing this kind of shit, like I said, when Bizarro was sort of founded in 2005, and before, they were already doing this shit. They were already harassing publishers, and they were already demanding this crazy shit. And then even almost 10 years later, here they are knocking
people into supervillains.
Yeah, and 10 years later, they're not.
It's every time you reject somebody, it's like you punched them into a vat of chemicals.
And there comes the Joker.
And out comes the fucking Joker. Exactly.
Oh my God, that is a fantastic way to put it.
Like sometimes they're okay and they understand why you punch them into a vat of chemicals. Sometimes they just fucking melt. Sometimes the Joker comes out.
And you've got an adversary for life. God, how true is that?
Yeah. That unfortunately happens in the publishing communities.
So you failed. You set up all the red flags. They're like, no way.
I set up all the red flags, but I was still like, but I had gotten Merlin published, and I started hanging out on Bizarro Central. And I started talking to these guys, and then there was like talk of an event called BizarroCon, and I decided I was going to go to the first BizarroCon. Armed
with what? Armed with your need to be...
Merland, the clothes on my back, and the knowledge of like 3 or 4 Bizarro books that I'd read, including the BSK Orange, and just blind faith. And I went there, and like within an hour, I was at the Eraserhead offices, and there were, you know, and it was a bare bones place at the time. And then I was like hanging out at Trader Joe's, like buying snacks for the con with Jeff Burke, and Jeff and I immediately clicked. And there was like,
for those that don't know, Jeff Burke is the editor-in-chief of Deadite Press, which is the extreme horror imprint.
Shatnerquake and Shatnerquest. Shatnerquake being one of the most popular Bizarro titles of all time.
Right. So, yeah. Did you have any material that you were going to submit to these guys?
Material that I was like going to give to Eraserhead, but there was the pitch workshop at the beginning. There was a workshop where you brought a Bizarro pitch, and everybody like talked about like, would I buy this book? What would I need to buy this book? And they would committee, and you would see like, you know, is this a potential project Eraserhead could pick up? And Eraserhead became a more open community through that.
And what did you pitch at that?
I pitched a book called also a bit about my time in Pennsylvania called Times Are Really Hard and Pig and Shit, which was about a town in Pennsylvania that these incredibly foppish, super goth, hot topic vampires move in to, and they start building giant castles, and they start doing flamboyant, stupid, hot topic vampire shit, and they make people become peasants laboring in turnip fields for pretty much no good reason, and then suddenly these peasants start dropping dead, and they start coming back to life as old school like Slavic mythology vampires, just as like drooling Slavic revenants that start eating people. And the only authority figures in this town are these like incredibly foppish hot topic vampires. And this kid returns to the hometown to start like he's failed as a documentarian, and he ends up having to stand up to these vampires. It's essentially about a vampire story that has like different stakes, and then like everything starts to go to shit because there's this Amish Bale cult that eats people that starts roaming in, and you know they like the idea, and a bunch of stillborn babies start coming back to life and eating people.
Who did you pitch this to?
They like the idea. I pitched this to Eraserhead at the pitch workshop.
Right. Who was involved in the pitch workshop?
What? This was the pitch workshop was at the time. It was Carlton sitting around at a table with like 10 of the BizarroCon attendees. Myself, Bradley Sands, Spike Marlowe, Jeff Burke, Cameron Pierce. These were the people that would. I can't remember anybody at that table who did not eventually become. Hold on, I'm sorry. I somehow lost you guys again. Oh no, there we go.
Here.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, you're here, we just lost your video. How did you feel going into that pitch meeting? You had never met these guys before.
I hung out with them a little tiny bit a couple days earlier. I was really nervous.
Yeah.
But I was excited. I was proud of my idea, and I wanted to see how it did. And
did you develop the idea beforehand, or did you develop it on the spot?
But it didn't. It did okay. But the following day, I did the Ultimate Bizarro Showdown. which is a contest essentially of weirdness. It's where we stand up in front of an audience for 4 minutes, and we're just like, we do a presentation that's as fucking weird as humanly possible. And the person who does the weirdest presentation wins a bunch of prizes and gets bragging rights as the winner of the Ultimate Bizarro Showdown. And I was the winner of the first one. And they were like, well, you fucking brought it, and we want you to come up with something to work with us. The next year,
that was the gates opened at that point. They said you're the Ultimate Bizarro Challenge winner. You have to publish something through.
Oh yeah, they were like, I was the first one there, and I just like I actually managed to, wow them performance-wise. I was glad that happened, and the
the Bizarro.
And then I pitched then they said, like, we want a book of Jimmy Plush stories, and the next year I was writing a book of Jimmy Plush stories and selling pre-orders to make the money to go to BizarroCon.
Is that what you did at the Ultimate Bizarro Showdown? You did Jimmy Plush?
Oh, no. The Jimmy Plush story came a few months later. At the Ultimate Bizarro Showdown, like, I improvised. I got up to the microphone, and the first thing I yelled was, "Yo, motherfucker, we don't allow people made out of bricks in the library. Why don't you go fuck a duck?" Was the first thing that came out of my head. And it's like this gangsta robot librarian just told a man made out of bricks that he needs to go fuck a duck. And so the man made out of bricks goes, and he decides to fuck a duck. And he discovers that it's the most fun thing ever, and he goes back to the Gangstabot librarian, and they have fun going out and fucking ducks together until Library Commissioner Mecha Charles Dickens ×2 finds out about it and decides to ruin their fun. And so I was just standing up there and improvising and full of adrenaline and totally sleepless and just like screaming at the top of my lungs about various acts of bestiality and a giant robot two-headed Charles Dickens.
Now, had you ever done any kind of improv before?
And people were like, wow, this guy apparently is... We had initially thought that maybe Garrett Cook wasn't that weird. And we were wrong with this assessment of Garrett Cook, and he is apparently kind of weird.
He is apparently kind of weird. Had you ever done any kind of improv before?
Because I'll tell you that.
Had you ever done improv before?
Oh, yeah, I had improv experience from high school theater classes. I'd done a couple of plays in college. I essentially, acting taught me a lot about writing. I recommend any writer take acting classes. You learn so much about writing through theater classes, and you learn so much about people. You learn so much about relating to people and working as a team. It's very, very important to have all those skills, and you can learn them in theater, you can learn them in film, and it's a good place. Acting classes, I wholeheartedly recommend for any author who might be listening to this. If you have a chance.
A lot of authors have a problem with. A lot of authors, they might be great at creating scenarios. They might have perfect poetic prose that just drip off the page and would make any creative writing professor immediately hard. But they have a problem relating to characters. They have a problem creating characters that are fleshed out and multidimensional.
And acting is about people.
Acting, when you sit down with your character and you look down at your lines, even if your character has 5 lines and is in a 10-second scene,
you've got to be the best. Juror number 3 that you can.
You have to know. You have to know why is juror number 3 here? What perspective is juror number 3 coming from? What life experiences is he bringing to the table? And acting teaches you all of those things about character. And if you take that, and I never thought about that before. This is off the top of my head, but going into writing, that would help so much in creating your character because you already know.
It did. It really helped me learn how to create characters and learn how to create narrators and get into people's heads.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
So, to any writer.
So you leave BizarroCon 1 as the darling of BizarroCon, and these guys, it's time to work with Garrett Cook, and you sit down and you figure out Jimmy Plush, Teddy Bear Detective is where it's at. Who were you working?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of, I was at that point, kind of down and out. I was in a bad place in my relationship. I was having absinthe for breakfast.
So you lied. So you lied on the questionnaire when you said you didn't drink.
Yeah, but that ended up going into Jimmy Plush. I spent some time, I spent a few years, I spent a few years very miserable.
Who did they assign you to work with for Jimmy Plush? Who was your editor?
I became Jeff Burke's only Eraserhead author. I am still Jeff Burke's only Eraserhead author.
He still works with you? He's still your editor when you write books?
Jeff is still my editor, and Jeff is wonderful in that he understands that when I give him a pitch, the thing that I have pitched doesn't matter. I'm probably going to write something completely different from that. He understands I will send him a synopsis, and that synopsis I will be lying out of my ass, and I don't know what's actually occurring until I write my story. And often it's true, I don't know what's actually occurring until I write my story. And sometimes I'll take things that in a book, I will take things that outright got rejected, and outright
put them in anyway.
I'll put them in the book anyway, and I will hope that they work, and I will hope that nobody notices. And Jeff is great about either not noticing or understanding that's my process. My process of doing things wrong.
I see. That's the secret then. You just blatantly ignore the notes of your editor.
Blatantly ignore your Write your outline, because your outline is something. It gives you some idea of what the story's about. Sometimes it's good to write your outline, but your outline can't be. But your outline should not necessarily be gospel. Sometimes your outline is going to be the absolute opposite of gospel. I
think it has to be.
My second Bizarro book, Arcalan Ranch, was supposed to be about a cowboy on his way to a magic mental institution. It is not that. Arcalan 3 wants to write the back cover for.
I've seen authors comment that they've written entire notebooks of notes about the backstory of their character that's never going to go into the work. I've seen people talk about having 300-page outlines.
Those people who are more power to those people who are that meticulous. But the thing is, your notes. Nobody is going to publish your fucking notes.
I find, personally,
nobody is going to publish your outline. There has not been a book like the Great Outlines of James Joyce.
Yeah, the best outlines of the 20th century.
There is never going to be an anthology, Year's Best Outlines. That's never going to fucking happen, and you need to understand
that attitude.
Outlining.
I like that attitude. Here's what I think. My correlation to outlining and to doing too much meticulous backstory creation of your character outside of what the actual narrative work is going to be is you're going to have sex with your girlfriend or boyfriend for the first time, and leading up to the act, you're nervous, but you want to perform your best.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
The best way to perform is not to masturbate 4 or 5 times a day the week leading up to it, so that you walk into the room ready to impress this person for the first time, and you've already spent your energy. You go in sluggish. You go in, this is personal. Yeah, too tired to fuck, too burnt out. You don't even want to think about sex at the most important moment. And this is just personally. Everyone writes differently, and I'm not trying to tell people that they're right or they're wrong. But personally, I have an instinct for 3-act structures because I've done it so many times. So I can literally take an outline that is a title, a first line, and an ending, and I can write a 3-act structure knowing nothing else about the work. And I'm not bragging or anything. That's just personally
that's how that works for some people.
Yeah, that allows me to put the most energy into the words that people are actually going to read. Not like you said, nobody's going to publish the year's best outline.
Contradicting my characters is one of the things that I don't like about outlines, is that my characters, they they do what they're going to do. T.S. Eliot says character is plot, and that's true. Nothing happens to somebody that it's not right to happen to.
Yeah, I have characters that outright refuse to die. I have characters that from the moment I start a story are an expendable character, a character that's destined for death. Their death is going to give the main character, a reason to get to the next scene. And when it gets close to that, they don't want to die. They no longer want to die, and I have to figure out how to get the main character to the next scene without that other character's death, because they're just not going to die.
Well, it's a good policy. Just listening to your characters is always important.
If you don't, it comes out phony and phoned in, and a lot of times you'll get stuck later on down the road because your characters are making plot-based decisions instead of character-based decisions, and you may end up having to abandon the work.
And they're more interested in you're more interested in your machinations than in your story. You can't be more interested in your machinations than your story. That's just that's the extent of it.
So at this point, you are the author of the flagship work Murderland. You are the darling of Bizarro Con 1, winning the battle. You go home with the renewed energy to write Jimmy Plush Teddy Bear Detective with Jeff Burke as your editor. And how does this year play out for Garrett Cook, the author? You said you were in a bad place. You were having absinthe for breakfast.
My relationship was starting to fall apart. I was drinking absinthe for breakfast. I was suffering from a lot of anxiety because people, this was a state in which I didn't think I got a do-over. This was stage fright. This is the worst case of stage fright I had ever encountered in my life. I was so proud and so happy to be part of Eraserhead, and I was so proud and so happy to be with someone I loved. Proud, and I was so happy to be writing the book that I loved, that I wanted to write. It's kind of like I kind of shut down with anxiety, and I started just being a person who would have absinthe for breakfast and things like that. I would mix absinthe and Monster Energy drink into something called Genius Juice.
Oh shit!
I would have that in like a 44-ounce big gulp cup.
Shit!
It was nuts. That was a time. There was a moment in which I thought my heart was going to stop, but I prayed and I took a bunch of aspirin. I just fucking gunned it through what may or may not have been an angina. So that was the state I was in at the beginning of Jimmy Plush, and Jimmy Plush was a very anxiety-ridden book. That was it's a book about manhood and the things that are expected of us as men, and the absurdity of those things, and the absurdity of heroism, and all kinds of sexual problematics and all kinds of performance anxiety problematics in life. That book
do you think that was manifest because of the extreme amount of pressure you put yourself in for the project that was ahead of you?
I think it definitely was manifest because of the extreme amount of pressure I put myself in, and just because of a lot of old issues that I hadn't dealt with. So the time during which I was writing Jimmy Plush was is from some of the worst months of my life, and my life has been no prize. And it just kind of I eventually managed to finish it and get it out there 3 months after Jimmy Plush. Actually, the day Jimmy Plush went to the printer, my mother died of double lung cancer.
So you were dealing with that while you were writing.
So I was dealing with a book launch and the death of a woman who raised me by herself until the age of 8.
That's heavy.
That was it was incredibly heavy. So the whole Jimmy Plush process is not a process I liked, but I had Jeff and I had Eraserhead, and there was a lot of distance between the two projects. I had books that were just like I had books that were just not gonna happen that occurred there, and I thought for a little bit that I was never going to come up with another suitable pitch, and that I was never going to appear in print again. I was editing a lot, and I started Imperial Youth Review, but I started those things in the mind that I was semi-retired.
As a writer?
As a writer, I thought I wasn't sure I would have another book again.
Is this after Jimmy Plush or during the period where you were writing?
This was after Jimmy Plush.
Okay, well let's back up a bit and
my mother and.
Let's back up to before the publication of Jimmy Plush and the death of your mother, and let's talk about the period during which you wrote the book. How many months was the writing process?
The writing process was the first. It was Jimmy Plush is made up of 4 vignettes. The first 3 vignettes were finished in 2.5. Were finished in like a month and a half. The next vignette languished for 3 months, and sometimes I get lengthy periods of writer's block for really dumb shit that I'm ultra technical about. I am really anal retentive about fight choreography.
I always have a problem with that too. It always
causes a lot of this causes a lot of writer's block. I will admit to I just didn't realize that I was in an absurd situation, and the particular fight choreography of the situation was simply impossible. I didn't realize I was writing something completely absurd. I eventually found an absurd solution and made it past that, because this was not a logical hand-to-hand combat. This was a combat between a teddy bear detective and a mob boss the size of a mall.
No, when I say that I have trouble with fight choreography also, a lot of our listeners might be puzzled by that, because I would say, what do you think, Sean? 70% of every single one of my works of fiction are scenes of fighting and violence? Am I being conservative by saying 70%?
That sounds about right.
But it really, a lot of what slows me down is not knowing how the fuck these people are going to fight, and not knowing.
Exactly. That's one issue. Another issue is just figuring out how to keep it dynamic. I love the Robert E. Howard fight scene. The Robert E. Howard's Conan and Solomon Kane books, that's how you fucking write a fight scene.
And those are probably 85%.
Yeah, and they're 85% fight scenes, which is why they're 85% good. I love the shit out of Conan and Solomon Kane and stuff. I love these pulp heroes. That's where Jimmy Plush came out of.
Yeah, well, one of the things that a lot of my readership, they tell me that I'm pretty good at writing fight stuff, but the reason I think that they enjoy what I'm writing is because so much of my narrative is taken up by fighting that I still have to add character development, and I have to have plot progression while these people are bashing each other's heads in and setting each other on fire and growing to the size of of malls.
It shouldn't be meaningful. It's I hate when people say this book is full of meaningless sex and violence. There's no such thing as meaningless sex and violence. Have you ever been hit, motherfucker? If you think there is meaningless sex and violence, then you've never been hit or you have never had sex.
I love that.
As meaningless sex, there's no such thing as meaningless violence. Sex and violence are language.
I started off, my original love of fiction and filmmaking and pretty much all fictional narrative work came from a stint as a manager at a video store. And I would sit, and we'd have long hours. Me and the owner of the store would sit and just obsess over movies. We would watch movies at the store. We would talk about our favorite movies, talk about our favorite actors, directors, blah, blah, blah. And he was an older guy. He was about 15 years older than me. So his heyday, his favorite era of filmmaking was the 1970s, where mine was the 1980s. And he was constantly, I would tell him, well, my favorite stuff is, monster movies or action movies or, shit like Last Action Hero or Predator or just, shit like that was just excessive 80s and 90s ultra-violent action or horror or sci-fi movies. And his favorite genre was drama, was 1970s, early 80s drama. And I would always, he would try to make me watch these movies, and I would always be like, dude, I am not into dramas. Whatever you're trying to show me, I'm not going to be into. And then he would show me The Godfather, or he would show me Slaughterhouse-Five, or he would show me these fucking amazing films that were nothing but the most excessive... Taxi Driver, exactly. The most excessive violence and sex, but done in the most artistic manner. I couldn't believe it. My eyes were just glued to the screen like, this is amazing. I can't believe how poetic this ultra-violence is. So you're absolutely right. I totally agree that there is no such thing as meaningless sex and violence. I guess it can be written poorly, and people can write it in such a way that
you can dilute the meaning, but I think at a certain point that then says more about that then derives meaning by saying something about you as a hack.
Definitely.
I think a bad film tells you as much, if not more, about the filmmaker than a good film.
So let's go ahead. We've now Jimmy Plush, Teddy Bear Detective is out. Let's well, first of all, no, I want to ask you one more thing. Your first draft that you submitted to Jeff, had you been showing him pieces of? Were you showing him each
Jimmy Plush story to the magazine Bizarro Fiction, and he said, I love this character, but this story is boring as shit. It's really damn sad, and it is really damn sad. Jimmy Plush is a really damn sad character. And so I said, well, what if... So maybe I'll write another story with Jimmy Plush that is not an origin story, and that is not really damn sad, except in the way that's really damn sad. And he's like, okay, do that. And so I did that, and I wrote a more slam bang, I wrote kind of more of a Mike Hammer story than a Phil Marlowe story. And with this Mike Hammer approach, it worked, and it was a lot of people's favorite things in issue 1 of the mag. And it was Jeff's favorite thing in issue 1 of the mag. And so we ended up, so he said, write more Jimmy Plush stories. And I basically, Jimmy Plush is a creation of found pulp. It makes the claim that I've been writing pulp since the 1950s. Everything is reprinted from Startling Adult Mysteries #1, 1953.
I gotcha.
Adventure and magazines like that.
So these stories that you were writing that would become the book.
It's fake. It's essentially it's found pulp. I reverse engineered a mythos.
So were you showing these to Jeff one at a time, or did you compile the collection?
Them two at a time. Then he finally told me a few months in, he didn't know what was missing, and he's like, you need to kill off this character's girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna kill off his girlfriend. And because of the tendency to kill off people's girlfriends in fiction to create tension, I decided to satirize that by having him meet another girl at the same party, fall in love with her, engage with her, and then murder her at that party.
Well, that's intense.
So I intentionally did I double fridge girled to point out how fucking stupid fridge girling is. Fridge girling is really fucking stupid. It's something we need to start avoiding doing because it's totally fucking condescending to women and makes them into MacGuffins.
Did you express that to Jeff when he suggested it?
No, I wrote it. I wrote that into the story.
You might as well have.
With this character is so pulpy and so ridiculous. His world is so pulpy and so ridiculous and so full of faux machismo that fridge girling is the only thing that's going to set him off.
So it was essentially it was one big fuck you, Jeff.
Not necessarily. I thought it was a good idea. I just don't approve of fridge girling. It was good in the context of this character. Jimmy Plush does not do things that I approve of. He is not a person I like or that anyone should like. Jimmy Plush is fucking awful. Time Pimp is awful. Jeremy, the hero of Murderland, he's fucking awful. Satan's Mummy is definitely fucking awful. That's not up for debate. There can't be people who are like, oh, I find Satan's Mummy marginally sympathetic. No.
Interesting. So you have a tendency to write unsympathetic characters.
Essentially.
So by the time you finished writing the book, Jimmy Plush Teddy Bear Detective, Jeff had already basically approved of everything and was ready to go to print with it.
And then we got to print. The day it got to print, I had to deal with with a release that it was for me an underwhelming release. It was no fault of Eraserheads. It was my fault and my emotional state and my having to deal with the grieving process and releasing a book at the same time.
Totally impossible.
At the same time, it's totally impossible. You need to give yourself time. But I've always been a person who's just I was raised by someone who said walk it off, essentially. When you get hurt, I was raised by an ex-Marine, you know.
Tough.
So that's how that went. And yeah, so I mean, were a lot of people who loved this book, and I'm glad for all the people who love that book. But I was left for a while just not having the right ideas and thinking maybe I was done.
Was it well received as an Eraserhead release?
Jimmy Plush was well received. It got a lot of good reviews. It got some good blurbs. It got some attention. People wanted to read more Jimmy Plush stories. Considering the state I was in when it came out, when I was writing the Jimmy Plush stories, I did not feel very inclined to write them. I would love to maybe write more Jimmy Plush stories someday at a time when I'm not feeling psychotic. But they are a memoir of a time when I was fucking psychotic.
So they were well received, and you were at a point where you considered yourself semi-retired. Did you think that you weren't going to be able to write something that was going to be as creative?
I thought I just couldn't come up with something to follow that. And I thought that I couldn't, I couldn't come up with another good premise that was appropriate for my publisher.
Had you tried and were rejected, or had you just?
I tried and we just had the wrong project. We had very much the wrong project. It was a cool idea, but there was literally no way to market it, and the central book. The central piece of it was something coming from a place of such raging, frothing madness that I generally don't wish it upon my worst enemy. By the way, it's going to be the feature novelette in the next issue of the magazine Bizarro Fiction. So if you were interested in seeing raging, frothing madness that I would not wish upon my worst enemy, you'll get to check that out. I'm very proud of it for being that, though.
Fantastic. So
you can't necessarily, you can't. Expect people to buy herpes in a can. I was just in a place where I was just trying to sell people herpes in a can.
Right. I want you to feel the way I feel, and I feel.
Exactly. I want you to feel the way I feel. Here is some herpes in a can.
Yeah. Wow.
It seems that my phone battery is running very low.
All right.
It's been great talking to you for about an hour and a half. This has been great.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. We loved having you on, and I have a lot more to talk to you about. So let's do this again in the future, and we'll cover the.
And I would absolutely love to tell you about the time pip situation and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have you on again, and we'll talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll talk about the further adventures of Garrett Cook.
It's been great talking to you guys.
Definitely. All right.
Have people were there people in the hangout talking about this and watching this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what do we have going on? What do we have going on in the chat room?
In a vacuum, so I have no clue who the fuck I've been talking to or if anybody. But that's cool. Thank you, people who have been listening. This got played. This went places.
Where can people find Garrett Cook online?
I'm pretty ubiquitous on Facebook. If you need my services as an editor, I'm leaving town forever, and that'll take some extra scratch. So I'm willing to take on some extra projects. So GarrettCookEditor.wordpress.com. I come highly recommended by some folks. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we'll catch up with you, and we'll do another edition of Garrett Cook on the Strange the World podcast, and we'll talk to you later. Sean, are you there?
My internet went out, and then I come back, and you're saying goodbye.
Well, we're just going to say goodbye to Garrett for now. Do we have anybody in the chat room?
Oh, okay. I don't know, because the comments have been all weird all night, so I'm not sure if anybody has replied or if anybody has seen my comments. I've been talking with John Bruni about it, and his comments aren't really showing up very well either, so something must be wrong with YouTube tonight or something.
You said you can still hang out for a few more minutes, Garrett?
Yeah, I can definitely still hang out for a few more minutes.
All right. Does John want to come on?
I
do you have John on Facebook?
Does John have a question?
Well, we can.
I'm interested. He was here.
Huh?
Yeah.
I asked if John Bruni wants to come on, or anybody wants to come on.
I don't know. I just asked John. I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure if anybody else does, because YouTube comments have been being all weird all night. Sometimes things are showing up, sometimes they're not. So John said he's having the same problem too. So it's not just my shitty internet.
Weird. Well, that happens from time to time. This has been such a smooth show, technically.
It has. Like, I didn't know where the time went.
Yeah, we definitely we burned through it.
This has been great. Yeah.
There's been a lot of great sound bites.
Invite John.
What's up?
Invite John. He wants to hop on.
Okay, yeah, cool. I'll talk to another person. I'm at 13%. I'll live dangerously.
All right,
living on the edge, Garrett Cook.
Sure.
You settle down.
I gotta find him. I never have his fucking email address. Give me just a second.
Oh no, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking too. So you mentioned something earlier about college classes, Garrett. What did you go to college specifically for?
I went for literature and linguistics. I eventually was working on translating Dante's Inferno.
Oh, cool.
It's Italian, because that's a big passion of mine. I had to leave college for political reasons. I do hope to get back to my translation when I have the money and some time to just sit somewhere in Florence and language and just finish my translation of the Inferno.
This is an intense motherfucker, Sean Ferrari. We don't have guys on this show that come on talking about we're going to translate Dante's Inferno. As soon as I get some time, maybe head down to Florence. You're a cool dude, Garrett Cook. I like talking to you.
Yeah, I've liked talking to you too.
John Bruni.
How's it going?
How's it going, John Bruni?
All right, yourself?
I'm doing all right. How are things?
Things are going well. Strange Story Saturdays are going very well.
They are, aren't they? We're having a lot of fucking fun with that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Have you submitted anything for Strange Story Saturdays, Garrett Cook?
No, I have not submitted anything for Strange Story Saturdays. I'll see if I have a thing.
We're doing, it's 500 to 1,500 words. It's kind of loose, kind of not. John?
I got some. I might definitely have something.
John wants to be a Nazi about it, and he doesn't want 1,501 words. I'm a pushover. I'm a pushover. If you're like, Kevin Strange, can I please? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'll put you in there. Don't you worry about it.
You put my first novel up.
Right. Garrett, we haven't announced that we announced on Facebook, but we haven't talked about on this show one of the main reasons we brought you on here at this time is to announce that you are a member of the Strange Sex 2 anthology. Yes. So our first Strange Sex anthology was the very first thing we ever published, and I guess because we made an exploitation sex anthology, it went over really well, and it's still pretty much the best thing we've ever published. So we're hoping that lightning will strike twice, and the Strange Sex 2 anthology, which has a lot of really cool authors, a lot of your fellow Eraserhead.
Looks like you've got some good talent. Looks like you got some good talent together. You got Tiffany.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
You got Dan Lashty. You got Andrea, who's like was one of my students, and who I love to death. Her work is fantastic. So glad she's out there.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a fun book. We're still working on the cover. We're still reading through. We've got a few more submissions to read. We're going to decide which story is going to be the cover theme, and then we're going to have who's the cover author that we're using, Sean?
Are we using Gary?
Gary McCluskey, who's done a bunch of covers for us.
Yeah, is he the one who did Damnation 101?
No, Jesse Wheeler did Damnation
101.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah, we really liked. Yeah, that cover's fucking awesome. That actually, Damnation 101 is up for the Bizarro Wonderland Awards. But that's cool to see him.
Yeah, it's definitely on. I believe I voted that one for. I believe I voted that one for Swamp your favorite band clients.
Kevin.
Yo.
Yeah.
We got a special guest in Pedro Proenza. He wants to hop on and say hello.
No way! Pedro wants to come on?
Pedro.
Tell Pedro he's got to send me his email address on Facebook real quick.
I sent it to you. He sent it to me. I sent it to you.
Okay, we're going.
So, Garrett,
live
without giving away too much about your story in Strange Sex 2, Rape Copters, tell everybody what it's... Try to give them a little premise about that.
Garrett?
Hello?
Garrett froze up. We lost him.
Frozen.
He probably lost his phone.
He said, fuck you, I don't want to talk about that. But...
Here the fuck comes Pedro Proenza is on the fucking way. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a first. This is the first time, I promise you, that any of these fucking people have ever seen or heard Pedro Proenza. There's a whole community just waiting to hear his. If he doesn't sound like this, I'm going to be crushed. It's going to be like finding out Jesus didn't exist.
Oh, shit.
John.
Yes.
What a 4-month waiting period on Strange Story Saturdays. How fucking cool is that?
That is very cool. It is incredible. I keep getting these amazing submissions. Almost all of them are great. It's hard to reject them.
It's going to get to a point soon where you're going to have to definitely get a lot harder with your acceptance process, or we're going to have a 2-year waiting list on this thing. That's so fantastic, cool. And they're getting a lot of views on the website. Like there's a lot of people are reading these stories, and now we have some motherfucker named Steve that's criticizing every single story. If you haven't looked, go back and look through all the Strange Story Saturdays and go down to the comments, and there's some fucking Steve character that's he's got a fucking strong ass opinion on fiction. Let me tell you, he really knows shit.
Oh yeah, he's a hard ass. I'm not even sure if he's real, to be honest with you.
Do you think it's John Bruni? Do you think it's John Bruni masquerading as Steve? Are you accepting these people's stories?
That shit in his sleep.
He's accepting these people's stories, and then he's editing them, and then he's posting them, and then talking shit on them in the comments. John Bruni is a one-man band, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I think he might be not real, because I actually clicked on his name to find out what his website was.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those sites where learn how to get more tweets or whatever it is.
Oh, he's a bot? There's no way he's a bot.
I don't know, man. That's where it goes to, so I don't know. I really don't know.
What's he saying? Just like, cool story, bro, but shitty ending.
The newest one was, I think it was Dumb with a D. I think it was capital D or something like that.
Dumb with a capital D.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just.
Oh, man. Where the fuck is Pedro Proenza?
I don't know.
We've only got 7 minutes to go. And
That's
Pedro
all was dumb with a capital D.
Pedro's a fucking no-show.
What the fuck, Pedro? Pedro Proenza. Pedro. Oh, damn plugin is taking forever to install, says Pedro.
Oh, Pedro's fucking trying to install a plugin. It just it never fails with this goddamn show. We're gonna go live in 30 seconds, and I'm like, hey everybody, can you put some headphones in? 30 seconds before we're gonna fucking start the thing. Sean Ferrari actually hasn't gotten up and left and switched over to
I did a
his
couple
phone.
times.
Did you?
Yeah, I got up twice. I cut my finger once on my cell phone
You
case.
cut your finger?
Yeah, I had to get up and stop the bleeding and shit.
We had a medical emergency on this episode. I didn't even know it.
And then the doorbell and shit rang, and I had to get up for that.
Who was it?
Katie's brother-in-law.
What does he want?
He brought me a ladder.
He wanted to buy some weed?
Yeah, he brought me a ladder. Being a nice guy.
What do you need a fucking ladder for, Sean Ferrari? What are you doing?
My shitty old gutters need cleaning out.
Isn't that the landlord's job?
Yeah, he already came by and did it, but I wanted the ladder, so I didn't tell him.
Oh. All right, well. Anyway, that was a fantastic show. What did you think of Garrett on the show, John Bruni?
I think it was very interesting to see his perspective. I mean, I haven't read a lot of his work. I've read Time Pimp, which was great. I love Time Pimp. I love the Sherlock Holmes murder mystery part of that book in particular. But it was really interesting to see somebody on the show that I wasn't really familiar with. He's the first person that we've had on that I really just didn't know anything about, except for Time Pimp. But it was really cool. Yeah,
now we know a lot about him, and we've got enough. I bet there's enough content to do another show with him and not repeat any of what we've already talked about. I barely scratched the surface of what I wanted to talk to him about. I find out, oh my God, it's Pedro Proenza! Pedro! Pedro! Pedro!
Pedro?
Pedro, where are you?
Pedro?
Pedro Proenza! If he's not shirtless, Pedro! Dancing to Portugal. What's up, Pedro?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. You sound exactly like I thought you were gonna sound.
I thought I sound like this. I thought I spoke like this.
What's up, Pedro? Is it like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning where you're at?
No, it's 11 o'clock.
It's 11 o'clock at night? Aren't there fucking riots going on? You got the World Cup in Brazil right now, brother.
It's literally on the street I work on.
On the street you work on, there's riots, or on the street you work on is the World Cup?
Both.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Because this is a yearly thing. So do you just try to stay the fuck out of the way, or do you fucking put a luchador mask on and fucking join the fucking crowd and just punch women in the face?
I try to keep away when I can. I'm not much of a fight guy.
That's just the culture, right? You just it's just a given that well, there's gonna be riots next week, so let's get the other locks on the door.
Yeah. Let's avoid the subway, avoid the bus. That's it.
Do you have any friends or immediate family that have ever been affected by the World Cup riots?
No, I have friends who joined the riot.
They fucking put on luchador masks. They're fucking punching little babies around.
Yeah, exactly. No.
Hey, Garrett. Apparently, it turns out I'm the sort of cautious motherfucker who keeps a second cell phone battery on hand.
Second cell phone battery? I've never owned 2 cell phone batteries at the same time.
Neither do I.
Howdy, Pedro.
Hey, Garrett, how are you? I want to apologize for my accent.
Oh, no.
Don't apologize for that accent, motherfucker. You earned that Portuguese accent.
Hold on. Is it Proenza?
Pedro! Proenza!
Proença.
Well,
Pedro Proenza fucking taught
Yeah.
himself how to read English. So
Yeah.
he can read.
I'm familiar with what a badass Pedro is.
He's
I am very
can you imagine? Can you imagine being like, I really like this shit that they're writing in Portuguese. I better teach myself how to read it. Americans are far too fucking lazy for that, Pedro.
No, I mean, I did that with Italian, but most people don't.
Most people.
Yeah.
I can barely muster up the fucking courage to wipe my ass after my morning shit, let alone teach myself another language.
You're still learning English, Kevin.
I'm still trying to learn English.
I actually I learned English out of laziness. Actually,
How do you learn it out of laziness, Pedro?
I liked watching movies, but I also liked staying on the computer, so I couldn't read the subtitles, so I had to memorize what the words were saying because I didn't keep looking at the screen. I was on the computer and watching movies at the same time.
That's incredible. So you weren't even like learning the class or Let's Guide or anything.
No.
You learned straight from porn.
That
porn, right?
I gotta say, like, your English is fantastic, and your writing is very good.
Oh, thanks, Garrett. That means a lot.
Pleased by the stuff you contributed during my class.
Thanks, Garrett. That means a lot.
Another question I have is English to Portuguese. Is it? Do you have to read more? Is like an English sentence twice as long in Portuguese, or is it about the same, or is it less?
It's about the same. Same thing. It's about the same. English, and I don't mean to sound cocky or anything, but English is kind of easy. It's kind of an easy language.
It better be, because we're all lazy motherfuckers, so it better be easy.
I know more English than Spanish, and Spanish should be like a sister language from Portuguese, and I don't know. I can't understand anything some Spanish people say.
It's too
Portuguese
fast.
is more Latinate than Spanish, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's much more of a Latin root, because I noticed like you've got like the AOs at the end and stuff.
Yeah.
That's very like I was reminded like when I was first listening to like the Coffin Joe films, which is like I encountered Portuguese, was like I was noticing that a lot of things he said I understood because I took like a semester and a half of Latin, as opposed to like the 3 years of honors Spanish I took in high school that, I remember practically none of, in spite of having dated a woman born in Mexico for 7.5 years.
I just recently started talking to a young lady that is of Latin descent, and I can't deal with the Spanish. It's too fast. She talks too fast. I have to make her talk in English.
Yeah, it is.
Dumb it down for me, will you?
You got to talk in American.
Well, certain dialects of Spanish are faster than others. Argentine Spanish, for example, is very leisurely and kind of English sort of Spanish. Just like the Spanish they speak in Barcelona, Castellano, is also a bit more formal, but Mexican Puerto Rican Spanish to come across like faster language.
Yeah, Spanish is a language.
Machine gun fast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Spanish has many variations. Chile is a different kind of Spanish than Peru, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, Pedro, do you like, we call it soccer, do you like football? Is that something you're interested in, or do you, so this is a time, this is an exciting time for you right now?
I love the World Cup. I just love it. Around here, it is a religion. Around here, it is a religion for many people. It's kind of a bittersweet thing, because there's the riots, the protests, the government is fucking everyone, etc.
Explain to me the protests. Explain to me why people protest the World Cup.
they think that the government spent much more money than needed. They build a stadium in the middle of the Amazon, never gonna be used. There's no teams there. After the World Cup, the stadium's gone. It will be.
This is the same problem countries that host the Olympics have, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. And there's the Olympics here, 2016, right here in Rio. It will be hell.
In the Amazon, man, at that World Cup stadium.
Sorry, Garrett, I didn't hear you.
They should hold them in the Amazon then at that World Cup stadium.
Yeah, it would have some use then, but it's gonna rot away there, never to be used again after the World Cup.
Wow.
Kind of like the idea of like some Olympian potentially being eaten by a jaguar. I don't know why. I like it.
Yeah, up there, it's a real possibility. It's in the middle of nowhere. Just to get there is hard. It's hard. The roads are clay roads.
Did you
Mud roads.
Did it cost a lot of money to attend matches? Was it impossible to get live tickets?
Yeah, it's pretty expensive. I didn't even try to get a ticket. They sold out, and we have I don't know the word. People who buy the tickets to resell on the street.
Scalpers.
Yeah. Scalpers, yes. We have a big scalper problem and everything on shows. It's like in dollars it would be like $200, $300 a ticket. In the worst part of the state. In the worst part,
in the nosebleed section.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually have a friend I went to high school with. It's a huge soccer fanatic. He's there right now. He's in Brazil.
Cool.
At the World Cup. Anyway, Pedro, we've got you on the show. I don't even know where to start. Real quick, favorite Bizarro author?
Jeff Buck, because he wrote my favorite Bizarro book, that is Shatner Quest.
Shatner Quest or Shatner Quake?
Yeah. I like Shatner Quest better than Shatner Quake.
I've got Shatner Quest right now, but I haven't gotten very far into it. Shatner Quake I own, and I like that a lot.
References?
Sorry, Garrett?
Is it because of the magic references?
Yeah. There's a Magic the Gathering reference on the first page, but it's about that the friendship thing, the group of people. I relate to that the protagonist group that really spoke to me, and I really love it.
Well, it's one of the nicest books about nerd culture.
Yeah, exactly.
About nerd culture that I've ever read, I would say. I was really happy with that one.
Yeah.
Are you a big Magic the Gathering fan, Pedro?
Yeah. That's an understatement. Yeah.
An understatement? You really?
Yeah.
Were you like were you Pro Tour? Were you doing Pro Tour qualifying?
No. I played on 2 Pro Tour qualifiers, and there's another coming. We don't have those too much around here. There's like 5. No, there's like 10 a year in the whole country.
You actually cared about Magic.
Yeah. I play a lot.
Pedro, I used to play Magic the Gathering a lot when I was younger. I considered myself what is a chess grandmaster? What are the different levels of grandmaster you can achieve in chess? Does anybody know?
Yeah. I think it's grandmaster is the highest.
That's the highest. Oh, I considered myself a grandmaster of Magic the Gathering, and then I retired, Pedro, because I beat too many people and it wasn't a challenge anymore. So you and me are gonna have to play Magic one of these days, sir.
Yeah.
I wish I still had any of my cards. I came in at unlimited.
Well, we can't play with anything that's been released within the last 10 years because I have no fucking idea how any of it works.
Katie's got a shit ton of Magic cards.
Some of them worth a lot of money. there was card that 10 years ago was like $20. It's like 300 now.
That's
It's
amazing.
very expensive.
I'm
Very
selling your
expensive.
cards to Pedro, Kevin.
A Black Lotus will let you about like 20K or some shit.
Yeah.
I have a very sad story. When I started playing Magic the Gathering in around 1993, I bought a lot of expansion packs and decks when it was, I believe it was the 3rd revised edition, and that's when cards like the is it the Royal Assassin? Is that the black card? I had Royal Assassins. I had Black Lotuses. I had rare lands. But I was the naive child, and I trusted people I shouldn't trust. And when the 4th, I believe it was the 4th revised edition came out, they took...
Came out, there were serious inflation problems. There definitely were in the market, yeah.
When 4th edition, I believe it was 4th edition, came out, they took a lot of legend expansions, legendary dragons and whatnot, and made them common cards in the 4th expanded edition. And
Chronicles, yeah, that fucked a lot of people over.
I was
that's why there's the reserved list list of cards that will never reprint again because exactly of that situation you spoke about.
I allowed these older kids to completely fuck me over because I didn't. This was pre-internet. You had to just be involved in card and comic book shops to really know what was happening in that scene, and I didn't know anything about it. I just had these kids really interested in going through my cards and were trading me things like Royal Assassins that I had many copies of, 5, 6 copies. They were taking like 4 copies for a legendary dragon that was now a fucking common or uncommon card, and I got fucked out of hundreds of dollars in super rare cards due to that fact. And I think that might have been one of the things that really turned me off to Magic was I just didn't want to put the effort into continuing to learn the new rules and the new expansions and following all that stuff, and I kind of got disenfranchised. But like I said, I was great, and I could beat you in an instant, Pedro, for we ever played.
I'm going to go through Pedro's cards.
Well, maybe you could beat
Pedro here, and I'm going to see if I can sell any of my girlfriend's cards for some money.
There you go.
Yeah.
There was a Pro Tour qualifier that I did in one. It would be Pro Tour Portland. So and when you win a qualifier, they pay for the tickets for you to fly there. Yeah. So I knew there was a lot on the line on that tournament because on top of being able to play on the Pro Tour, I would be able to meet everyone at Portland. I would definitely stalk everyone. Jeff, Cameron, Rose, etc.
Hang on, is that upcoming?
No. It's past.
And you didn't win?
No.
Oh.
No. Unfortunately.
How far did you get?
I went 6-3. 6 wins, 3 losses.
Not bad at a Pro Tour qualifier by any means.
No.
How many wins did you need to get into like the finals?
If I went 7-2, maybe I could get to the top 8. 7-2, maybe.
So you almost made it there. You almost made it.
Yeah.
What fucked you? Was it your lack of depth in your decks, or did you just have guys that were more skilled than you that beat you?
Yeah, that's right.
It was a sealed tournament. You open packs and you build with what to get.
So no one could have an advantage.
Yeah, actually, I went 0-2.
There's a lot of ways to have an advantage at booster draft. One thing, like if you know the set well enough, if you know the set well enough ahead of time, you can really screw people over in booster drafts.
By knowing the combos beforehand.
By knowing the combos, knowing the cards, knowing what you're looking for, and knowing what to hand to other people, knowing what to hand off to other people, what decks.
Yeah. Drafting is not fun. Drafting is not.
It definitely is. A lot of it, like even like just handing people something that looks really good that's crap, that will lure them into making the wrong deck. Yeah.
So you can trade once you get your card. Once you open your sealed cards,
you take a card and you take a card. Everybody opens a pack. You take a card, then you pass what's left to the left.
Okay.
And then that's how you build your deck completely out of the random things that you acquire.
I see. Fascinating. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. I would still murder any of you in Magic. What deck you give me? I'm a savant at Magic the Gathering.
You can come.
I'd love to play. I'd love to play, Kevin.
Oh, we're gonna play because one of these days you're gonna go to BizarroCon and we're gonna play Magic the Gathering the whole weekend and completely ignore the events.
I beat him. I've beaten a guy who had infinite turns before.
Really?
Yeah.
Garrett Cook has some game. Pedro, we're going to wrap this up. Do you have any questions for either John, myself, Sean, or Garrett this evening?
No. The whole show was just a how-to guide to writing, etc. It was one of your best shows. I just wanted to come on to say hi to you guys because it was a really good show.
I'm glad you did. It was great talking to you, Pedro. It's great seeing you.
Thanks, Gary. You too.
I hope you can make the BizarroCon. Yeah, I don't care what game you have to get rid of that.
Yeah, win something, motherfucker. Win something and come up to BizarroCon.
Learn Monopoly.
John Bruni needs to win something to go to BizarroCon too.
That'd be nice.
Good, yeah. You guys should all get good at various games instead of finding.
Gainful employment be damned.
Setting aside $200 for a plane ticket, you gotta get really good at various games.
Yeah.
All right, Pedro, in your honor. Yeah. In your honor, Pedro Proenza. I'm gonna watch some Brazilian fart porn tonight. But for Sean Ferrari and John Bruni, I want to thank Garrett Cook, our special guest for the evening. And
thank you for having me. It's been great talking to you guys.
It's been fantastic. You're an awesome personality, and you're a veritable tome of wisdom when it comes to this weird fucking writing shit we do. Pedro, it's a fucking honor. This is a classic episode with the first appearance of Pedro Proenza. And
wow. First time you've had Pedro, I am so fucking honored now.
My name is Kevin Strange, and this has been Strange the World.
Strange the World?
Strange
the
World.
Strange the World.
Strange the World. Strange the World.
Strange the World, Kevin Strange.
My name is Kevin Strange, and this has been Strange the World from Strange House Books. And we have a new book coming out called Strange Sex.
It's very strange.
Overcompensate for a lack of talent much? Strange the World. Strange the World.
Strange the fucking world.
Strange the world.
Only together can we strange the world, folks.
Hey,
let's give it up for the riots in Brazil. Let's give it up for speaking Portuguese. Strange the world. Strange the world.
Hey, Garrett. The world.
Garrett, was this like a world premiere announcement of your horror book for Deadite Press, or have you told the public that before?
I've told the public that I'm working on a horror book that's going to go to Jeff. It might get shot down, it might survive, but he approves his pitch, and I am making this, very, 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 very unpleasant, to the point at which I can barely endure it. So I hope that I hope that I'm not just like I haven't just been some kind of pussy for all these years, and I'm onto something.
I wrote some pretty brutal shit for the hardcore fucking horror anthology he's putting together. I haven't heard back whether it's going to be accepted or not, but I pushed myself pretty hard and wrote a.
I've got to write a story for that one. Yeah.
I wrote a Loch Ness monster porn.
Oh, there you go.
Strange the world.
If you don't.
Strange the world.
Loch Ness monsters fucking girls.
Loch Ness monsters strange the world.
Strange the Loch Ness Monsters.
Loch Ness Monster, the world.
Strange the World.
Estranhe o mundo.
Oh,
Did you just say that? Did you just say Strange the World in Portuguese? Teach us.
Estranhe o mundo.
Estranhe
O mundo.
O mundo. Estranho o mundo.
El mundo.
Estrange Mundo.
Yeah. Close enough.
Strange the Mundo.
Yep.
Strange the Mundo, folks. See you later. Until next time.